Welcome to the life you crave. Simple and sustainable weight loss for women who have better things to do than diet. I'm your host, Lia Pinelli. I help ambitious, badass women stop overeating, overworking, and overgiving to lose weight from a place of love. I'll help you simplify weight loss, end your overwhelm, and create the life you crave. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to this podcast. Let's get started. Hello, my femmes. Here at the Life You Crave podcast, we are re-releasing some of our greatest hits, podcasts from our show that have had the most downloads, the most popularity. We wanted to re-release them here so that they would be right at the top of your podcast feed so that you can dive in and enjoy all summer long. And if you haven't already, please head over to Facebook and find me, Lia Pinelli, and join our Life You Crave community there. It is our podcast community where we are expanding on what you are learning on the episode, diving deeper, building community, and having a lot of fun. So come on over to Lia Pinelli over at Facebook and join my Life You Crave community there. Can't wait to see you. Hey, everybody. This is the final episode of a 4-part series on how I lost 30 pounds and have kept it off for nearly 5 years without dieting or using willpower or restriction or a bunch of crazy discipline or crazy or crazier workouts. In part 1 of this series, episode 59, I shared with you the one powerful tool that got me started on my permanent willpower-free weight loss journey nearly 5 years ago. I learned how to eat only when I was hungry and stop when I wasn't. Then, in the following 2 episodes, 60 and 61, I shared my nothing short of mind-blowing, life-changing revelations that I had around these concepts of overhunger and overdesire, and how these 2 problems really must be solved before we can ever break free from diets while also living at our natural weight with minimal effort, right? There's a lot of programs out there that offer to help you stop dieting, but don't also help you to feel like you are at home in your own body, not carrying extra unwanted weight. So when we solve for overhunger and overdesire, that's how we can actually release ourselves from the ball and chain of dieting while also shedding those unwanted pounds that are the result of overhunger and overdesire. So if you missed those 3 episodes, be sure to go back and check them out because they really do lay out not only the path that I took to food freedom, but also the foundation for my 90 Days to Food Freedom program, where I take women on their own willpower-free weight loss journey. And of course, if you want to learn more, head on over to liapinelli.com. That's LIAPINELLI.com and book a call with me so we can chat about whether or not that program is a good fit for you. Today's episode addresses the reason why every diet you've ever tried didn't work for long. Even if you lose weight on a diet, research shows that something like 95% of us are going to gain it back and then some additional pounds within 5 years. In fact, there's actually some really depressing research that shows that people who diet are likely to be heavier in the long run than if they had never dieted at all. How depressing is that? At least it was for me when I first learned it, before I had these tools. I felt like I was just destined then to be chronically overeating and overweight. But don't worry, this can totally be undone by, first of all, committing to not diet anymore, right? So that we're not in the long run heavier than we want to be, but also changing our eating behaviors and our mindset. That is how we can undo this pattern of dieting and then just being heavier. And this is exactly the work that we do in my 90 Days to Food Freedom program, changing eating behaviors and mindset. In today's episode, I'm going to teach you 3 things. I am going to be focusing on that 4th pillar of how we how you also can stop overeating and lose weight permanently. That fourth pillar, after learning to eat only when you're hungry, which was number 1, stop when you're not. Pillar number 2, solving for overhunger. Pillar number 3, solving for overdesire. And now today we are talking about how to stop emotional eating. I'm going to talk today about number 1, what emotional eating is. 2, how you know if you're an emotional eater. And here's a little hint, most of us are on some level, right? Like most of us are emotional eaters on some level. It's just for some of us, it actually causes us to self-sabotage our goals. And then the third thing I'm going to be teaching today is the first steps to stop emotional overeating and self-sabotage. So the reason that diets like Weight Watchers or keto or whatever else, the reason that they don't work in the long run is because they don't actually address the psychological and emotional aspects of eating and why we self-sabotage in the first place. What I mean by psychological and emotional aspects of eating is best illustrated by me sharing a few personal stories. One of the stories that I always share with my clients when they first start with me to help illustrate what I'm talking about when I talk about, emotional eating, because a lot of people will say to me, well, I'm not an emotional eater, because what they picture like a scene from a movie where there's like this girl who's binging on ice cream uncontrollably on the floor of her kitchen. And yeah, that might be emotional eating, but that is not what it usually looks like for most of us. So I like to share a few personal stories with my 90 Days to Food Freedom program participants so that they can really get a sense of what I mean and what I'm talking about and how it may or may not apply to them. And I'm going to share those with you right here. So the first story that I always like to share is when I used to work as a high school leader. I was an administrator. And it was a tough job. It was intense, it was demanding, and it was exhausting. And I also had a little one at home, a very little one, a toddler. And I would get up really early for work, and I would be in the office for usually somewhere between 9 and 10 hours a day. And then I would head home in terrible Bay Area traffic, sitting in the car for 45 minutes when the actual commute without traffic is about 12. And I would get home and I would be exhausted. I was not very happy in my job. It felt demanding and unsatisfying to me. And all I wanted was to see my son. I was so excited to come home and see the little love of my life and my husband and relax and unwind from the day. But after going through an emotionally rough day and a bunch of traffic and getting home, and being confronted with the onslaught of demands that, having a child often creates, such as having to get dinner on the table and unpack the bag from daycare and get bath time done, and also just wanting to visit and say hello. I haven't seen my baby all day. And there was so much that needed to be done, organizing the mail and going through, just the entire evening routine. If you have a demanding career, you probably know what evenings can look like in your house. Your house looks like a bomb went off, and there's dishes to do and lunches to pack and emails to respond to from teachers or caregivers. So much. And so I would come home and I would just feel exhausted and overwhelmed. So what would I do? The first thing I could think of is I just want to connect with my family. So let me open this bottle of wine, get out some cheese and crackers, and start snacking and drinking to get me through the night. And then dinner would get on the table somehow with bath time, and dinner was usually something like pasta or, even something simpler like hot dogs, anything on the table, which I would then devour. And then every night I remember I would wash the dishes, and I would be washing the dishes, and my son would finally be to bed. And I could not get through doing those dishes until I had at least 5 chocolate peanut butter cups. I love the dark chocolate peanut butter cups from Trader Joe's, and I would keep them right above the kitchen sink. And as I would wash those dishes, those peanut butter cups would call to me, and they made washing dishes better. They were delicious, they were yummy, and I would eat 5, maybe 8, 10 of those every night while I did the dishes. And it was just this cycle of feeling exhausted and tired and not wanting to feel exhausted and tired, wanting to feel relaxed and joyful with my family. But instead, in order to find that relaxation and that joy and that pleasure, I was going to food and wine to try to make my evenings fun and exciting and pleasurable. And the truth is it didn't actually help. I was still grumpy and irritable and tired and just wanted to go to bed. But in the moment, it helped. In the moment, that sugar hit or that glass of wine, it helped. In the long run, it hurt, right? In the long run, it wasn't what I really wanted for my life. I didn't want wine and chocolate peanut butter cups to be my source of pleasure. And you've probably experienced something like this, right? Another example that so many of us feel is a Friday happy hour, right? Where you've been working hard all week long, tons of demands on you, and you just want to let loose and you don't want to feel deprived. So when we're on a diet, this is when we do so good all week, quote unquote. But then you get to Thursday or Friday night. For me, I could never get to Friday. It was always Thursday. But we get to, Thursday or Friday night and it's like, your coworkers are like, let's go get some drinks. And you're like, heck yes, right? And the next thing you know, you're face first in a plate of nachos and a pitcher of margaritas and you've undone everything that you did during the week. And that feeling feels so good in the moment, but then you wake up on Saturday morning or even when you're heading home Friday night and you're like, oh, I did it again. Why can't I just stick with this? Why can't I just follow my plan? And the reason that you can't follow your plan is not your fault. The reason that you can't follow your plan is because, a lot of times it's because your plan is unsustainable, right? If you're sitting there eating salads with no dressing all freaking week, your brain's going to go cuckoo bananas for those nachos and margaritas, right? Because you've been depriving yourself all week. But also so that, what you've been doing is unsustainable. So that's the first problem. But emotional eating is the second problem, which I'm going to get into. The reasons that I'm sharing with you of eating because you're tired or exhausted or dissatisfied or because you've worked really hard, one of the things that my clients often say to me is, they feel like at the end of the day, they want a reward or at the end of the week, they want a reward. And so they see the brownie as the reward. And I'm like, girl, we want the brownie. You deserve so much more than a freaking brownie for the contributions you're making in this world right now, right? Like you deserve so much more than a brownie. So we really want to remove the brownie as being this idea of reward and really address what would a reward or a treat really be for you? What is pleasure really for you? So these examples that I've given you so far from my own life, from happy hour to feeling tired or exhausted, or even when I would be at work and I would have that afternoon slump that so many of us experience after lunch. And for me, it would always hit about 2 p.m. where I just needed a snack. I needed sweets. I needed sugar. I would look for chocolate and coffee and popcorn to kind of stimulate me, to keep me awake. And speaking of popcorn, all through college, I could not get through a study session without eating pretzels or popcorn or something like that because I needed that stimulation to help entertain me through the tedium of the work I was doing. And even though I loved my major, I liked what I was reading, it was hard and tedious to read those huge textbooks, right? And just like at 2 p.m. when you're at work and you're sitting in front of a computer and we have tedious administrative work to do, the popcorn and the chocolate and the coffee is what we go to try to get us through it in a more pleasurable way. So these are all emotional reasons to eat. So if you've ever experienced any of these, then you've eaten for emotional reasons. And for women in particular, these reasons often stem from a deep sense of overwhelm and stress and exhaustion and obligation and a general underlying dissatisfaction with our lives because the demands on our lives have only increased and not decreased since the women's liberation movement of the 1960s and 70s, which I am grateful for, by the way. But yet somehow we as women we've piled on now career expectations on top of mothering and parenting expectations on top of all of these other expectations for how often we should be working out and what our hair should look like. And, there is so much heaped on top of us. And so therefore we look to food and wine for many of us to feel better. We eat to soothe. We eat to make it all better. And like I said, you guys, it's important to recognize that in the moment, it does make it better. Like you're not imagining it. Your brain's getting this sweet dopamine hit from the brownie. Your brain's getting a sweet dopamine hit from the glass of wine. So for a moment, we do feel better. And that feeling is then what we jones for. That's why when I would be driving home, all I could think about was the big glass of wine and the cheese and crackers, because I would know that I would feel better when I had it. But then it's like a bad dream, because when that euphoria of the wine and cheese wears off, or the peanut butter cups wears off, when the euphoria of it all wears off, we are left worse than when we started. Because now we're going to pile on guilt and shame, right? Now we know our pants are going to be even tighter tomorrow, and that we're going to feel even shittier. So now we're not only overwhelmed, exhausted, and stressed, but we feel like fat shit on top of it, right? And we do this, when we feel like shit, what do? We soothe ourselves again in the same way that we know how, with food and with booze, and the cycle continues. In my 90 days program, emotional eating is honestly the biggest obstacle that we address to permanent, sustainable weight loss for my clients. Women will often come into the program saying things like, I know what I need to do, I'm just not doing it. And I get that. I've been there. The reason you may not be doing it is because whatever you think you need to do, as I mentioned earlier, is actually not the thing you need to do, and it's actually quite painful and unsustainable. And in that case, we should talk. Because the truth of the matter is that living at your natural weight, once you've solved for overhunger and overdesire, living at your natural weight feels really, really fucking awesome and not painful at all. But the bigger, more probable reason that you're not just doing it, is because of your feelings, because of your emotions, because of your thoughts like, I deserve the brownie, or I'll start again tomorrow. Right now, I just really want this. I'm going to share with you how you can really figure out if you personally are an emotional eater, if maybe the stories I've shared don't totally resonate, or if you're not totally sure. One, we can hop on a call and chat about it. You can sign up at liapinelli.com. It's kind of my jam to help women with these things, so sign up over there. But most important thing to recognize, to figure out if you are an emotional overeater or just emotional eater, it's important to recognize that there are really only 4 reasons that we eat in the first place. The first reason that we eat is physical hunger, right? So, and if you haven't figured out your physical hunger cues, please know that there's nothing wrong with you there either. In fact, there's really good reasons why you don't know when you're physically hungry, but I have a free training on how to reactivate your physical hunger and identify your physical hunger signals. And it really is the first step in stopping emotional eating. So you can get that over at liapinelli.com as well. It's a free 17-minute video training called Eating Without Fear, and you can get it at liapinelli.com. But physical hunger can be triggered by overhunger, right? So a lot of us do have actual physical hunger that is the result of overhunger, which is feeling genuinely hungry frequently and having trouble then feeling satisfied until the point that you're stuffed, right? And I talked a lot about this in the previous episode 60, I want to say, was all about overhunger. So go check that out. But again, this problem of not being able to feel your physical hunger or stuffing yourself can be solved for life by going through my 90 days program. So that's the first reason we eat, is physical hunger. The second reason we eat is what I call habit hunger. Habit hunger is just eating because it's a habit to eat at this time or in this place. So what that might look like is, it's 12 o'clock. It's time for lunch. And we don't even ask ourselves, oh, wait, am I hungry? Right? It's just 12 o'clock. So you go get your lunch and you eat it and you don't even think about it, right? Or breakfast. This is a huge one for my clients. Just waking up and eating because it's a habit. I wake up and then I eat, and not really checking in with your physical hunger. So that's the second reason we often eat, is habit hunger. Or we'll eat just because it's there, or because we have an association with it. So another example of that might be eating popcorn when you're watching a movie, and that might be habit hunger. Eating popcorn when you're watching a movie, though, can also lead to kind of tie into reason number 3 for why we eat, which is what I call pre-planned pleasure events. And that could be popcorn. So for example, if we go to the movie theater, I almost always get popcorn, even if I'm not hungry, because I love popcorn. And it's pleasureful for me to enjoy popcorn at the movie theater. So that would be a pre-planned pleasure eat, right? Where I'm eating for pleasure. I'm not actually hungry, and that's okay. And other examples of pre-planned pleasure eats would be things like birthdays or holidays or vacations, right? So just kind of recognizing that, for example, I'm never hungry for breakfast. I almost never eat it, but I do have Christmas brunch or Easter brunch, for example, even if I'm not hungry. So those would be pre-planned pleasure eats. And that's the third reason that we eat food. But the last reason is emotional eating, and that is illustrated by the examples I gave you earlier about my peanut butter cups that I was eating while washing the dishes every night, or the wine and cheese that I was eating every day when I would come home from work. And it is emotional eating that never actually gets addressed in traditional diets. Even Noom, which purports to do that, isn't there for you really at 9 p.m. after you finally get the kids to bed and finally have a minute to yourself, and all you want is a big-ass glass of wine and a pint of Ben & Jerry's in your current binge watch on Netflix, right? Like, Noom isn't going to help you in that moment. I get that, because that's the real hard part. That is always the actual obstacle. Because you're smart. You can Google a diet, right? You can Google a diet that works. If you follow it, it'll work, right? But what you can't Google is how to not feel deprived, like for real. And this is where I say the problem isn't food. I mean, it is food. If you listened to episodes 59 through 62, you do know that, like, yeah, it is food. Food is part of the problem, but it's not the actual root of why we can't seem to lose weight and keep it off. The problem, the real problem, is our dissatisfaction with our lives. The real problem is how we respond to that dissatisfaction, how we respond to the overwhelm. How we think and feel about ourselves is the real problem. How we think and feel about ourselves as parents, as coworkers, as friends, our frustration with other people, and then our guilt about that. Maybe our frustration with our kids or our spouses or our bosses. Our fears are the problem. Our fears about the state of the world and the safety of our communities, or whether we're going to run out of money. The problem is all of that. Those things, those feelings of overwhelm and stress and frustration, those aren't even the problem. It's that we're eating to feel better about the problem. We think that eating is going to solve the problem, like I did. I thought that the peanut butter cups were going to solve the problem of overwhelm and stress and dissatisfaction in my life. And we end up screwing ourselves every time, because the solution isn't in the peanut butter cups. And by the way, the solution also isn't to stop having feelings, right? Like, we're still going to feel dissatisfied or frustrated or whatever sometimes. That's what makes us human, is having the feelings. But the actual solution is twofold. There's just 2 things that you need to know in order to stop the problem of eating to solve your problem. The first part of the solution is to learn to feel your feelings without eating or drinking. And I know this is way easier said than done. That's why I have an entire 90-day program to help women through this. And then the second piece is actually, I would say, just as challenging, but way more fun. It is so fun. The second piece to the solution is to actually create lives that we crave, to create a life that you love unapologetically. And that part can be really scary, really terrifying, but also wildly worth it. So here are the 4 steps toward that twofold solution. First, you have to become aware of your feelings. And I know this is cliche, you've probably heard it a million times, but it is so true, because you can't feel your feelings, which is step number 1 to the solution of stopping emotional eating. You can't actually feel your feelings if you are not aware of your feelings. So how do you do that, you say? Here's how you do it. The first thing you want to do is you want to ask yourself throughout your day, just anytime randomly, ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? And I would even suggest to you that you put a little reminder on your phone, maybe every hour if you're really ambitious, which I know a lot of you are, and that's why I love you, or maybe 3 times a day. It doesn't matter, but just ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? And for some of us, this can be really challenging, by the way, to identify your feelings because it's not something we're usually taught to do. So I strongly recommend that you can just Google like feelings wheel. And there are these really great feelings wheels out there that help you to really give you like just a ton of feelings to help you. And it's like a wheel that kind of walks you through how to figure out what you're feeling. And it'll take you 2 minutes. It's totally worth it. Feelingswheel.com is where you can get one, a really pretty one. So you want to ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? And don't wait until you're actually eating. You really want to make this a regular practice. So wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? When you hug your kids, ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? When you get to work, ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? When you're sitting in traffic, ask yourself, what am I feeling right now, right? Don't save it for the negative moments or the positive moments. Just ask yourself randomly throughout the day just to get in the practice of asking yourself what you're feeling right now and identifying your feelings and emotions. This can take a really long time to really get good at for some of us, but it is so worth it. I also recommend, I've mentioned the feelings wheel. You can actually like keep it on your phone, like take a screenshot and keep it on your phone and you can use it in the moment, right? When you're sitting in traffic and you're like, what am I feeling right now? I know you're not supposed to look at your phone, but you get the idea. Then what you're going to do, step number 2 is, we're still in step number 1, which is becoming aware of your feelings. But the first thing you want to do is ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? And then the second thing that you want to do is when you're actually eating, you want to identify your reason for eating, right? So if you're eating and you're like, what am I feeling right now? And you're like, I'm feeling rushed, right? That's great. So now you've identified the feeling. Now you want to ask yourself, well, why am I eating? Am I eating because I feel rushed? Or am I eating because I'm physically hungry? Am I eating because it's 12 o'clock, so it's a habit? Am I eating because this is pre-planned pleasure eat, like popcorn at the movies? If it's not any of those 3 things, if it's not physical, habit, or a pre-planned pleasure eat, then it has to be emotional, right? And so identifying the feeling is going to be particularly important in that moment. And once you've done that, you're like, oh, I'm eating because I'm bored. I'm eating because I'm stressed. I'm eating because I'm tired. I'm eating because I'm excited, right? Whatever it is, you get to then decide if you want to continue. Like, is this a reason that I want to be eating? And I want to be honest with you, this can be really hard to stop in the middle of the action. And most of my clients don't, right? They're like, I've totally recognized that I'm stress eating right now and I'm just going to keep going. And that is totally okay. But if you keep practicing this, that's not a fail, by the way. I have some people say to me like, well, I tried to, but I would just keep eating. So I stopped trying. It's like, no. That's part of the process, right? When you realize what's happening, when you realize that you are eating for stress and you decide to keep eating, you have not failed. Because what will eventually happen is if you keep practicing, you'll start to be able to recognize it before it happens. You'll start to be able to recognize it before you are eating. And then you actually have an opportunity to short circuit the process. You have an opportunity to stop before you've started. And it gets so much easier when that starts to happen. The next thing that I want you to ask yourself in the moment is, what would I feel if I didn't eat it? So this is what you'll be able to do once you can anticipate. You're like, ooh, I'm feeling really stressed. I'm totally craving a brownie, or I'm totally craving wine, or I'm totally craving chips, or whatever it is. I want to go eat that. What would I feel if I didn't eat it? Right? And this is the feeling that you're actually avoiding. I don't mean, sometimes when I ask that question, people will think I'm saying like, oh, I would feel proud of myself for not eating it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, what's the feeling you're trying to avoid by eating it, right? What's the feeling you're trying to numb by eating it? And that feeling is such a gold mine. So this leads to the second part of the solution to emotional eating, which is that we must elevate our lives to end the cycle. Right? So it doesn't work just to stop emotional eating without actually doing something about our dissatisfaction. We need to create lives that are better than food. Create a life that is better than a brownie, right? So quit the fucking job. Stop overcommitting to shit you don't want to do. Book that weekend getaway alone, right? Say no all day long. Lock yourself in the bathroom with earplugs, a good book, and a day's worth of bath bombs, right? Take the nap, dump the loser, apply for the promotion, Hell, start that business you've dreamt of, right? Ask that person out that you've been crushing on. Change careers, no matter how old you are, right? I promise you that when you solve for overhunger and overdesire, when you learn to stop eating your feelings and you give yourself permission to create the life you crave, you will have cracked the code on your struggle with food and weight. And you will 100% have food freedom. And this is what my 90 Days to Food Freedom program walks you through step by step. I am living proof that this works. My clients are living proof that this works. And my 90 Days to Food Freedom program is exactly where you can join us. So on today's episode, there was a ton of information. And I hope that what you're taking away from this is the understanding that there are 4 reasons we eat: physical, habit, pleasure, and emotion. And the emotional overeating is the number one obstacle to pleasureful and permanent weight loss. And the solution to stop emotional overeating is to learn to feel your feelings and then create the life that you crave unapologetically. I am here to help. I got your back, sister, and I cannot wait to chat with you over at liapinelli.com.
You've been listening to The Life You Crave. I lost 30 pounds years ago without dieting, willpower, or deprivation. I'm on a mission to help other women, including you, do the same. You can book a free weight loss strategy session with me over at liapinelli.com. That's liapinelli.com. See you on our next call or on the next episode. And remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment on iTunes.